Point. Okay, absolutely, we can do that.
And I would note, reason city staff is wearing a mask, we had a mandate from the city manager that any city staff needs to wear again. So that's why we're in masks. So.
Christine, where would you like to add that on the agenda?
After the minute?
After the minutes?
Maybe?
Okay, absolutely. All right, any other changes to the agenda? All right, then it is approved as changed. Did everyone have a chance to read the minutes? Are there any changes to the minutes from the previous meeting?
They look good. I'd move approval.
Move approve. Is there a second? All in favor of approving the minutes from the previous meeting, say aye. Opposed? Any abstention? All right, the minutes carry as dispersed. We'll move on to the opening statement. The opening statement of the Historic West Des Moines Master Plan Steering Committee. Welcome all to the Historic West Des Moines Master Plan Steering Committee meeting. This committee is made up of independent volunteer citizens. The makeup of the committee was determined the mayor and the city council. The committee is not part of the city administration. The steering committee is served in our efforts by the City of West Des Moines staff. The committee's purpose is to, 1, partner with the City of West Des Moines to build interest, excitement, awareness, and community census around comprehensive strategy for historic West Des Moines by representing the diverse interests of current businesses, residents, and investors. Number 2, work towards updating the master plan to address growth and redevelopment going forward into the future. 3, make recommendations and provide guidance to the city council on matters pertaining to the creation, revising, and implementation of the historic West Des Moines master plan. It is our goal that the meeting is orderly. We encourage discussion, but recognize the fact that there will be differences of opinion. We request that everyone is shown mutual reverence and discussions are conducted within a respectful manner. To ensure the meeting does not become unnecessarily lengthy, we ask that everyone's testimony be focused on new facts or evidence not already presented. If you wish to speak, please come forward, wait to be recognized by the chair, and then state your name and address for the record. Rules for public comment are as follows. When speaking, members of the public should state their name and address prior to making their comments. Each member of the public will be given 5 minutes to speak. All statements at the meeting shall be directed to the committee, and cross-conversation among those in attendance is prohibited. Questions shall be directed first to the chair, who may then ask the proper person to answer, with such answer also being directed to the committee. When the opportunity for public comment is closed, the public may only address the committee if a question is directed to them. In closing, this committee does not make final decisions. All recommendations made will be forwarded to the Plan and Zoning Commission and the City Council final action. Now going forward, we will hear from Christine regarding SharePoint.
So if you remember, we set up a SharePoint site that was the available electronic version of basically what's in your binder, and that exists, but we're having some technical difficulties. Peter from our office sent everyone an email with that invite, and then some people got it, some people didn't. We heard at the last meeting, followed up, and I know there's 4 of you that for sure cannot find it. Peter believes it's in junk mail, so if you really search in your junk mail, you might have found it. It was sent out July 16th. You could do one more search for a SharePoint. It would not say Peter. It would most likely say from SharePoint. Master plan might be in the subject. So coming from a different, it's not coming from a West Des Moines city email address. So that's maybe why it went to junk. But if you want to take a double check, and if you still can't find it, I've got 4 people again that told me they can't find it. I will get in touch with you individually, and we'll work through what's going on, because Peter said it's not as simple as just resetting it. So this is beyond me with IT, but we're going to work through it. So if you want access to that SharePoint, we're going to make it happen. Because I heard from several of you, 4 of you, that it did work and you were able to get to it. So, and then Steve, we probably have not added you.
Right.
So we will make sure we get you sent an invitation. So look for it in your junk.
Okay.
I'll warn you before it comes. Okay.
Mayor, this might be worthwhile, so they maybe introduce Steve too.
Yes, absolutely. Everyone, this is Steve Freevert. He is our new Executive Director of the Historic Valley Junction Foundation. He has been here a total of 2.5 weeks, and we're so excited for him to be part of the subcommittee and part of our organization and community. Not only is he an employee down here, but he is also a resident now. So we are excited to have him as well, kind of view all aspects of it. But I'll let Steve kind of let you talk about yourself for a little bit and kind of introduce yourself.
I'm not going to do that. I'll just say, it's been a learning process. I've done Main Street for 12 years already. I know some of the aspects of it, but I'm learning a lot of the technical stuff that needs to be done in the office and starting to see the light of day. Everybody has been super welcoming, and I could not be happier to live and work in this district. I feel really honored to be here.
Oh, we're happy to have you here.
I looked and I,
Yeah, so he will be taking Tom Jordison's seat on this subcommittee. And Tom Jordison is a property owner in Valley Junction. With his time commitment. He wasn't sure if he was going to be able to make all of the meetings, so we thought it'd be a nice transition for Steve to take his spot. Yeah. Anything else proceeding? We'll go ahead and open up Citizens Forum. Do we have anyone that would like to speak on behalf of Citizens Forum?
is there an internet access in here? Is there an internet access in here? Because
Yeah, there's a public one, I believe.
it's not, I just wondered and if,
Public.
okay. Thanks.
And is there anyone on the phones too that we have that maybe got dialed in? No? Nope. Okay. Seeing though we don't have anyone, we'll go ahead and close Citizens Forum and move on to the next point is review and discuss requests for proposal for updating master plan.
Hello, everybody. Once again, Brad Munford with staff. On Friday, I emailed copies of the RFP, the draft of the RFP that we penciled up real quick. Made sure that I had draft plastered all over it because it's a decision that you guys will help make. I do want to be clear that there's certain areas that are kind of standard that we have to use for our processes for the city. But today, what we really want to talk about and open up to you guys would be, we want to make sure that the scope of work that is found on page 2, starting on page 2 at the bottom, it's section 1.3. And there's 18 points in the scope of work that we're going to have a consultant do for us. It is very important for us to make sure that we have everything addressed that we need to have addressed in this scope of work. So I guess the first thing I would do, if it's okay with you, is just kind of the question. If anybody has any questions up front with the scope of work, if not, I'll kind of go over them. I'll just kind of go over each one of them kind of point by point. Yes.
Well, the email that I was sent, I opened it up and there's something crazy about my email server here, but now I can't get into the actual PDF again so I can look at it, follow along. Could somebody send it or is there something?
Oh, no, I was just.
We also added it in your in the
Okay.
booklet here. It's under, if you find the yeah, if you go to, actually, I'll tell you what, everybody, there's a yellow tab. It's kind of sticking out, little yellow stickers on the tab. That takes you to there's a memo that's attached to, which is, I'll get to that here in a moment. A few pages back, the next few pages back is the actual RFP, so you can read that. Yeah, in front of the memo.
Anybody else ever has problems opening in any assessments? Let us know if possible and get it some way or other.
That's the beginning of it.
Okay, thank you.
And you can tell also there'll be at the top of it, request for proposal. You'll see page 1, lower right hand corner. All right, so do we have any questions up front? All right, so I'm not going to read these verbatim. I'm going to kind of paraphrase them just for time purposes. The first one is to talk about, to have the consultant look at developing design guidelines for new construction and renovating buildings in the area. I guess I'll assume, unless somebody brings up a point, that this is something that we would like to keep.
Is it any good? Does guidelines imply something that would be descriptive and definite? Like, or, you know, what I'm concerned about, if in this we imply that there is more of a structure as to what needs to be done as opposed to perspective.
So if I'm hearing you right,
I've been in the 80s, we went through this, and there were some people who felt that it should be actually the owner of the building that and Meredith are in. He was very adamant that anything that be done should be in the era of the 1905 to 1915 timeframe. So I'm just wondering about if this seems prescriptive, or if there would be another word in addition to guidelines that could be a little more open-ended.
term guidelines, is basically, a guide on how we would go about doing it. With guidelines, the governing body it's an easier way to detour from a certain standard instead of for example, an ordinance, something that's in like the zoning
Sure.
ordinance is a shall versus a should.
Right.
Guidelines is a little bit more of a should, and it is something that staff would,
It probably more lays out the intent of what the plan is. In other words, the guidelines will spell out if there's a particular type of architectural style or type of building materials, different things like that. And number two would actually be specific zoning regulations that we might have to change to be in conformance with guidelines. So guidelines is kind of general, zoning ordinances is implementation.
and as far as the specifics of everything within a certain era, that's something that we would need to work out as a group and as a community on where we would like to fall.
And that's something we'll be bringing a consultant in with this group to solicit public input, to then come up with some recommendations for this group then to review, to make a recommendation to council.
It got to the point of ordinances back in that time, and so that's why I'm a little bit, I just, that's why I'm bringing it up. Well,
This is not intended to be an ordinance. We use the term guidelines specifically
Right.
for that reason.
I understand what you're saying.
Does this committee need to talk about what level of requirement, guideline, ordinance we feel is necessary in this area?
At some point in time, when we're working with the consultant, we'll get into that level of detail, yes, but not with the scope of work.
Do we need to know? Okay, so we kind of need to go through the process, and then an outcome will be determining what level of, I guess.
Specificity that we're going to be at.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Any other questions, comments? All right, the next one I talked about a little bit. It's actually developing zoning regulations and how to update those so that it will make it easier to implement the plan. That's to kind of, again, deal with how do we deal with height, deal with setbacks, how do we deal with, those sort of things. Considering what kind of brought us all here, I'm guessing that that is something that we would want to make sure is still in the scope of work. Correct? All right. Next one, number 3, is to go through a detailed parking analysis. We will look at existing and future parking within specifically the commercial district. So again, that's to kind of look at what's currently available, what will be available possibly in the future, and then also kind of looking at the ultimate build out, so to speak, as more buildings, more uses are plugged in, how are we going to take care of that parking need? Again, I'm going to assume that that's something that everybody is okay with, right? Detailed analysis of expanding commercial into the 400 and 500 block of Fifth Street. This is something that we had that survey. It was something that we kind of discussed. You told us that it was something that we may want to look into. So I am going to assume that that is fine as well. All right. So I guess, let me kind of go back again to, in the sake of time, are there any real issues that anybody have with any of these? I guess to kind of cut to the chase here a little bit more. Yes.
I just have one that's on item 13 to strike the word better, strategies on how to better utilize the upper story space. Commercial area, I think you should just read strategies on how to utilize the upper story space. Term OD1, and then another point, moving ahead, will be in the process. Any members of this committee in section 2.5 on the proposal acceptance report. This proposal will be reviewed privately by city staff. I think we need to have some oversight for this.
We'll get into timelines and stuff after we finish going through this, so.
So that's something that we'll. And so,
Brad was asking.
yeah. So as far as,
One of the things that has been identified numerous times in studies that we've had done in the commercial district is there is a lot of upper story space that is not being utilized at all, or it's being used as storage, things of that nature. And so what we would like to see is a specific plan on how do we re-energize that upper story space, whether it's apartments, whether it's offices, retail, what have you, because it's really unperforming property in a lot of senses. So what we'd like to do is figure out how to take advantage of the existing buildings we already have here and make them more productive.
I just was thinking the word better is non-definitive. And so by striking it, it makes it more conclusive in terms of what we're going to do, that we're going to have some specifics.
These are then.
Said,
And again, maybe it's being nitpicky. Yeah.
and that would
I mean,
kind of imply.
yes, I understand what Clyde had presented as a concern, because evidently there is some space that maybe we can use better or more effectively,
Yeah.
maybe best utilized. I mean, it's a matter of semantics.
I have a comment that kind of piggybacks onto this, and it is in relation to item 12, which is the analysis of what types of commercial uses might be missing in recommendations. I was thinking that maybe to kick this off before we have design guidelines, before we talk about what needs to go up to 400 and 500, if the consultant can walk us through the mix of what this neighborhood could have in terms of retail, commercial, restaurants. And this is in light of Mayor Gare's quest for us to engage that younger adult population that's pretty excited about this area, but I don't feel educated on what that looks like. So I don't know how we can decide where we want to go until we know what we want it to be.
What it could be.
What it could be. So, and I know there's probably a lot of good examples.
These weren't necessarily meant to be the sequence of how they're going to their work. Okay, so there is kind of a logical progression
Right.
for how you figure out how everything fits together and how you have to do things.
Sure, yeah.
Before you do
No,
a
no, I
parking
can
study, you
appreciate
gotta
that.
know what kind of uses you're.
Well, yeah, right. But maybe almost need to amp up this number 12 to,
Again, it's not meant to be a rank.
no, I meant um, it just says analysis of what type of commercial use. I'm thinking of like a visioning or case studies or a comparative analysis or
Market study.
market study or something. I feel like this effort could be diminished. And I think it's almost the most important. I don't care what, and not in terms of order.
So I'm thinking of more of a kind of a educational type component a little bit, or
Like, I'm sure the consultant can say, historic districts like yours that are thriving the best right now have this general maybe mix of uses. Their upper stories are primarily housing, or they have 30% restaurants. We have 5, like just to see, and then we can discuss, do we think that's where we might want to go? What do young professionals want? Mayor Gare was saying, let's look at what they want. I don't know what young professionals want out of this type, these experiential things. I don't know what that means. Is that an escape room? Is that a bowling alley? I don't know what that means. So
would it be kind of would we accomplish that by having them bring comparisons?
I think so.
So for example, if they bring up Old Town in Omaha as kind of an example, or if they bring up the Czech Village in Cedar Rapids and say, okay, here's the breakdown, here's the percentage of apartment units that we have.
Yeah.
This is the breakdown of commercial we have, office in these particular areas.
And yes, because then I think that sets a foundation for the why, so we can answer when there are questions of why are you investing so much money in upper story housing? Because that's what thriving historic districts have. So it just is all those proof points that we're building for the reason the master plan is being updated the way it is.
And if I can kind of piggyback off that, because it sparks some thoughts in my head. Can anybody think of communities or neighborhoods or examples that you've been? We've all traveled in different places, maybe not so much in the last year, but throughout our lives, we traveled to places. And Valley Junction reminds us of these other places, these places that we like. We can't necessarily put our thumb on it, on how we like it or why we like it. And I think that might be a way that we can accomplish that. So if you guys can just kind of maybe give us some examples of that, and maybe that's something that we can, as staff, we can kind of provide some of that information. We can have a consultant provide some of that information as well too, and hopefully answer some of the.
Yeah.
Fill that.
And then one more thought I forgot to mention is like also the mix of audience. So I don't think we have a lot for little kids right now. Like we don't have an ice cream shop, that type of thing. Well, I guess we got acai. But what is the mix of who are we attracting and what that mix of demographic is as well.
There was an interesting Main Street, you may have even been there, it was a few years ago, where a speaker said, if you can appeal to 8-year-olds and 80-year-olds, you got everybody satisfied, because, the 8-year-olds and the 80-year-olds, they're all going to want to sit down for a while, they're going to want to have some ice cream. So it was a really helpful suggestion, and that's right up what you're saying.
Yeah, and if we don't need to attract the 8-year-olds, right? I mean, I think this is what we're supposed to be figuring out.
So let me ask that question in a different way. Who are we trying to attract?
Yeah.
I guess that's more of a question of, and again, that's kind of why we're all here. We are, as staff, looking for you to kind of tell us. You guys are the experts of business in this area, the ones that have been living down here, that sort of stuff. So who are you trying to attract? What would make your business better for us? And so that's kind of a question, just like the question of communities or different areas.
Do you feel like we need to go through that process before engaging a consultant, or should that be more pronounced in the RFP that they would have the
I would
process?
have the consultant do it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they're kind of coming in the middle of the second act and don't understand how.
Yeah, so I think just as long as that is pretty pronounced of this, they're supposed to ask us, I don't know, how to get us there.
I agree. We're talking about the target population. And I think somewhere in there, exactly what you're saying, should be wording. I'm not seeing any of the 1 through 18 that talks about the population that we're trying to, what would be best given the use at, recommending or maybe recommended. So I think at least we should put that in there.
Right. Would, Julie, I'm just gonna ask a question to you, if that's okay. Would it be appropriate, based on what you're saying, to maybe add a number 19 that would say a comparative analysis of like areas and trends?
I would say, yeah, a comparative analysis, and then maybe like a best scenario for Valley Junction.
Isn't that number 17?
Yeah.
Yeah. It is, but again, I'm the type of person we're having a discussion. There's more to what you were saying.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
some of it's covered in 17, yes, but I think there's more there
Right.
as well.
And it's different.
I think that's also kind of what Ralph was kind of getting at. So do we,
I mean, I kind of trust that you can interpret that and get that in to the RFP.
I'm pretty confident we can get something.
Yeah.
Drafted.
Something that speaks about population specifically, so it's clear that, you know, we're looking at a target, we're looking to identify a target population or what kind of uses would best fit certain kind of individuals you're trying to draw into the area.
Question of what is your target? Because
Mhm.
truthfully, young professionals, they, you know, it's like, they probably don't want a whole bunch of little kids running around. You know, so what audiences are we trying to attract to the neighborhood, either to live here or to shop and have businesses here?
Yeah, and I think with specifically having that target population written within the scope of the plan will get us into that discussion. But I still think, you know, something specifically that talks about the population, the
Okay.
type of population or the target population that best serves the area.
Okay, so make sure that covering what you guys are looking for. So I think that number 12, if you expand that to say market study and analysis of what types of commercial businesses we might be missing. And then,
Or I would say, oh, I'm sorry, Clyde, I would say the mix of commercial, retail, housing.
And
And then-
neighborhood engagement.
Right. And then even, are they entertainment? Are they clothing? Are they antiques? Are they experiential?
And then just so that we can kind of make sure we have it on record, I'm not sure. Ralph, you started off with like a number 19 and you had some language written up. So if you can just have that, we can have that.
Yeah, what I just was thinking, based on what Julie was saying, that what I thought it sounded like is a comparative analysis of like areas and trends. I mean, some of that's addressed in some of these already, but more of a broad view of like what other communities like Valley Junction are successful in doing these things. And as a committee, I would sense that you'd want to see those. So we could make good decisions based on a sound framework of other people's experience.
And I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but I've been struggling with this issue for 40 years and especially the last 8.
All right.
And just from my own experience with the Lyric, the theatrical shop and the bank building, it was set up as apartments. And so the vision in my head was apartments. And at this point, there's no one living in any of them. And I have a tremendous amount of guilt because of that. And it's like, okay, what can I do? How can I fix this? Because there are shared bathrooms in the Lyric. Now we know that like today, that's not going to go over. The clientele that would come to that kind of an apartment complex would not really go for that. And I'm not going to lowball how I could rent those. And all this time, I kept thinking, how can I do that? How much money is it going to cost? And then I started thinking, wow, on the second floor, I could have it be what some of those spaces were in the bank building originally intended for, which is like office spaces or workspaces. They wouldn't all have to have their own bathroom. I could do that. And I wanted to have this whole vision. The front 2 rooms on the second floor, I want to open it up to this kind of conference thing. And I've talked to Vince about this. My parents had
furniture custom made for themselves in Mexico, and it's gorgeous. And I want to put it all over there, and I want to have it be kind of a Hispanic flavored kind of place, and have all these things. And then on the third floor, I could make it into 3 apartments, and they'd be really nice big apartments, and they'd have their own bathrooms, and I could get really wonderful tenants in there. But I had to completely change my way of thinking about this before my brain could even think of that idea. And I think what you're thinking about is be open-minded about what's possible.
Mhm. That's a good way to put it.
Right, and I think that we all have to be ready on our own timetable, and so, your mind's changed on some things and that's great. And it could be for the positive and we'll work with that. So I applaud you for saying that and coming to your own conclusion. Thank you for that input there.
Red.
Yes.
So not to beat a dead horse here, but when we originally started this process, it brought up we were going to look at and see what was historical and what wasn't. We're going to evaluate these buildings, an evaluation if we think we need to keep these buildings, if we're going to go to new construction, and it seems like we've walked away from all of that.
Well, I think one thing that comes into play is that there were historic studies done of Valley Junction.
So we're disregarding that now?
No, we're not disregarding it. It's already in place. So,
Okay, so
on the-
I know Councilman Trevelyan said there's some loops in that. Originally, he wanted to go back and reevaluate some of that. So just seeing where we're at, I don't know if anybody else feels like that, but
Are you referring to the,
time again, and this was brought up time and time again, and here we are, and none of that's in there.
well, I think that, and I'll let Clyde jump in here as well too, but I think one of the things, and that's something that we can add to it, but when you have a historical preservationist come through, look at buildings there and only have a handful of them that's eligible and that are currently listed on the National Historic Registry, they kind of came to the conclusion in their professional opinion that some of these other buildings, although that they have the age to be eligible, that some of the historical features of those may have been stripped down to the point where it's not
contributing?
not as historical as one would think. And so to kind of give an example, it's kind of like if you have a really nice older car and then you modify it and you put different kind of style kits on it and things of that nature. And while you're doing it, you rip out some of the stuff that made it valuable. You kind of lose some of that value. It's still that year, that model car, but so much of it's been lost. I don't know if that necessarily means, I'll ask Clyde to kind of touch on that. I don't know if that necessarily means that we should not go back and try that again. But I would say from considering that we already had a historian come through and do some of that work, we'd have to kind of question if somebody else would come up with a different study.
No, I guess I was on the understanding that there were only some people that have been in the residence communities longer and give their take on it, because some of it, they're missing a lot of the key pieces to it and the history of the city tied to certain buildings and stuff like that. I think that's where Kevin was going on it originally, and maybe I misunderstood, Ralph. Is that how you understood it too, or?
Yeah, I think maybe what we're looking at, Nathan, is what we're missing here is there's no, you're not seeing anything there about the historical concept or the historical components and how they're applied to the area from perspective. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, more or less. There's nothing
Like we
in
need
here at
to take
all.
that into account, and
That's where we originally started. Yeah.
So
there's two ways that buildings, property become historical. One is that it has so much architectural integrity left that on its own, just from its appearance, it can be listed historically. The other way is if there are an historic event or person or something of that nature that happened at that particular property that was so extraordinary that it should be listed as well. That's where you end up with situations where, Abraham Lincoln, his house, or, things of that nature kind of come into play. When a historian comes through and do a historic survey of an area, they look at both of those things. And through both of those things, they kind of came to came to that conclusion that only the certain smaller area should be there. With that being said, well, let me ask you, what type of historical things are you looking for? What do you think is historical that's not currently listed, or?
I just know this has been brought up a lot.
I have a thought, and it's crossed my mind before, that I think some of the consternation that happens with new development down here is people are worried that some of that beloved historicalness is being taken away. I think there's some properties, for example, when First National Bank tore down their buildings, I don't think anyone cried themselves to sleep at night because it just.
It was an old Casey's care.
Yeah. So I think there's some like excitement that can happen, but I think there's so much consternation that not about what is happening, but what could happen. You know, what if someone gets their hands on XYZ and they tear it down, or they.
Already happened.
Right. And so is there, there's a line between private property and your will to do what you want, and providing a level of assurance to the community that it's been recognized that there's a certain set of buildings that we would like to have preserved. And if then there's a trust from the community that if there is new development happening, that, oh, well, we know what buildings we want to keep. This must be something new. This must be something that's not really sacred. And just to at least identify that we feel this way.
And I guess I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Oh, well, yeah, I was going to kind of make an example of one of the things that's been talked about and worried about, and, you know, people have consternation about it. Like, say, for example, where on the 100 block on the south side of the street, on the east side of the street, where, you know, the 60s, what's the name of the store there? So
Atomic Garage?
Yeah, Atomic Garage. Now, that came up to me one time. They said, hey, I heard they were going to do something with that and tear it down or whatever, you know, but and that building was this and that and whatever, you know. Well, there's a good example of what you're talking about, or many of us here, that has changed, you know, and maybe it doesn't have the historical structure or the you know, that we're all talking about, maybe, you know, that's one of those. So I'm just bringing up an example, you know, something that, you know, people are worried about, you know, is that going to be one that's going to be affected or go down or be bought and changed, you know?
And if I can kind of I guess I want to kind of address a couple things here because, and again, I'm just, you know, me, I speak kind of directly. Historical preservation is not the silver bullet that kind of stops all of the things that we're thinking of.
Right.
All of that historical preservation does, even in the ones that we have currently listed, it does kind of slow down things a little bit. So for example, if somebody wanted to come in and tear down a historically listed building, even after it's been listed in Valley Junction, there are ways and methods that they can go about doing that. It's a little tougher, but they can still kind of go about doing it. What I'm hearing out of the comments is more of this concern of, you know, we don't want to just strip everything away that we have. There is kind of like I said before, when you visit other communities, there's something about the community that you're visiting that you can't put your thumb on. There's something that makes that special. That's what we need to try to preserve, and that's kind of what I'm hearing from that. We can do it through historic preservation, but we talked about those design guidelines. Somebody did come in to try to tear down that building. We can have those design guidelines in place and say, this is how something should look if it's going to take the place of this.
Right.
We don't want this building to be torn down, but if you are going to do it, this is how you have to go about doing it. If we did have it listed historically, that's all the historic listing would do. It would say, okay, well, is it in such bad shape that it won't, you know, there's a number of different things I won't get into, but they would still have to maintain it, build it or rebuild it in a certain way, things of that nature. And so I don't know if the design guidelines would help that or not, or if it's a situation where we do take on some of the historical things. So I'm actually going to point to Clyde here. I'm gonna ask him to.
Okay, well, I think Nate, a couple of things that you commented on, I think I was at least thinking that would be addressed in the design guidelines.
Can we
Okay,
make it literature written in there?
and then, yeah, and then if this we certainly can do this, and I'll fill this out, and, we probably need to wordsmith it. We could do an analysis of existing buildings and determination of their historic context or nature and recommendations for potential preservation or something like that.
That's good.
Yes.
My whole point of being on this committee and going to all those boring city council meetings is because these apartment buildings are going up that don't look like Valley Junction. If you get online on all the groups, they all hate them. Sorry, Scott, but they don't look like Valley Junction. Now, whether the building is historic or not, my building was a soda fountain back in the day, competing with a soda fountain across the street from it, and people will comment on that. My building is structurally sound. The only reason I see for tear down is if it's fallen down, or if it's structurally unsound. People on Facebook are going, oh, they're tearing everything down. One lady actually said they're tearing everything down in Valley Junction. These are the comments that are out there, and people are getting scared. And the longer this takes to resolve it all, the more these comments are out there flying around.
And I think, again, that's where we have our consultant kind of come in and work with those things. It
Well,
sounds like,
you're using the historic word a lot, and that's fine. It is historic Valley Junction. But the professional term of historic doesn't apply to some of the buildings down here, but it does to the customers.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about the National Register of Historic Places and stuff like that. We just need to make sure. St. Kilda's is a perfect example of rehabbing that looks like it fits in with Valley Junction. It's beautiful. It works great. The apartment buildings, the 3 that are going up, or the one that's up and the 2 that are going up, don't look a thing like Valley Junction. That's what we need to change.
and again,
That's design
that's the design guideline. There's.
I know, and the city pushed it all through, and it was
Well,
wrong
like,
to
again,
do.
It's not a push through. There's, legally, we cannot stop somebody if they need.
That's why we need to change the zoning.
No, and that's what we're saying. And so it's not necessarily, if we've already talked about in what's in front of you, we talked about changing the zoning. We talked about design guidelines. And the point at hand right now, what Nate brought up, and I'll let him speak, is historical listings and those sorts of things. So your points that you made are still valid. And I think and hope that they're still covered in what we have. If they're not, correct us. And I believe, Nate, go ahead. I'm sorry, you had your hand.
Sorry, I don't mean to keep this going, but does it have to be what's defined as historical, or can it be what's historical by city?
Well, you gotta use some what is the standard that you want to use? See, that's the problem. And,
Historic to Western Maine.
but
Right, but again, how does,
everybody's got a different idea of what's historic. I mean, if you got 20 people in the room, everybody's going to have a different idea of what's
Well,
historic.
let's figure out what that is.
Okay, so then my,
Is when the building was built, because Atomic Garage is historic, but it's from the 50s. It's built with concrete block. It's not from 1913 or 1893,
Right, but I'm
like
saying-
the lyric. So history,
can we say that just because something is old, it's historic?
No,
everything is historic up to the moment in time when you're talking, but you have to look at the history that it was built in. It's our story. It's our entire life as a community. And so to take your building that's in 1950s or,
no, it's 1900.
18, was it that long?
It's like 1910 or something. I don't know. I'd have to look it up, huh?
But let's take, say, Atomic Garage, and to try to turn that into a 1905 building doesn't revere the sacred, love that word, nature of that building's piece in time. And why Valley Junction is so revered is because it is our story, and it has all these elements that were part of our history that live together.
The one thing, though, I want to make sure everybody understands is because of private property rights, regardless of whatever regulations the city has, somebody still has the right to tear that building down. Okay?
Not if we change
As
the,
long as, or remodel the building or do something, as long as it's conforming with whatever the zoning regulations are and whatever design guidelines there are for that property. So just because, we say, well, it's historic because of such and such, it still doesn't prohibit somebody from using their property how they want.
I understand that, but
Point.
Actually, right.
I think right now we're kind of talking about something that we'd be talking about in the future. These things are all going to be addressed under the definition of design guidelines. And we can set boundaries, Clyde. We can set boundaries. And those boundaries can determine what and how future buildings, things will look like in this historic valley area.
Yeah.
I think we all agree, but what kind of started the discussion, and I want to bring it back to what the point that Nate brought up, is his concern is, and correct me if I'm wrong, should we have more of historical representation in our scope of work? And I think that Clyde read off some language that may accomplish that. I don't know if that covers what you're looking for or not. So for the sake of kind of keeping the conversation going, Clyde, do you mind reading
Okay,
what you
sure.
had? And then you can let us know if that meets it. If it doesn't, we'll try to see if we can wordsmith it to something that does work.
I had basically analysis of existing buildings and determination of their historic context and nature and recommendations for potential preservation.
I think sounds good.
Yeah, because I think the biggest thing is we just as
I mean,
a
it's
city
being
decide
respectful.
how we want to keep the Valley Junction area. And I think hopefully that'll accomplish that. So at a certain point, you're not going to be historical if we keep putting up new. And I think that's the biggest thing we got to keep in mind.
And that's the thing.
At what percentage do you lose that historical status?
Right. And
I think that's what we got to be really mindful of is we keep putting up new. At a certain point, we're not historical Valley Junction. We're just Valley Junction at that point.
absolutely. And I think it's just a matter of, again, as Clyde said, we have to come up with a definition of what we consider to be historical. And then when we come up with that definition, then our design guidelines, regardless of what's in the historic registry, can then protect those things that we consider to be sacred. And hopefully, if that handles what your concerns are,
Sure, yeah.
yeah, if it handles what your concerns are, I think that's something that we can possibly.
Can I ask a question?
It in history, the reason it's called Historic Valley Junction is so we could get the interstate signage thing, Historic Valley Junction on the interstate.
let everybody knows it as that. They don't know it as anything else.
I'm not disputing the fact that this is a historic
Right.
area.
You just want to.
I'm just saying, that's why we started calling it Historic
Yeah.
Valley Junction, so that we could get the interstate signage.
I will also point out.
Which is good.
I will also point out, this is
I don't know how
the reason why.
raised my hand, but
No, go right ahead.
I forget after a while. It goes on. I just, as we're speaking about this, maybe there is, as Clyde has says, there needs to be a learning process or educational process so that we can understand that whatever we're doing should be coming from an objective point of view and not subjective.
Yes.
And so what can help us arrive at that is to know exactly, like you just told us a tidbit, a nugget there, that it was for the interstates, et cetera. But what exactly makes it that? And I think number one takes care of a lot of what's discussed, and hopefully what we're getting into is what we're supposed to be doing. But I think we're here because there's mixed use. That's a given. Way I look at it, there's certain areas that could be deemed historical and appear to be historical with historical building. And I see that as almost like the 1 and 200 block. When you get beyond that, then that's where you get the gray area. And that's where, and I don't think it's no fault of any property owner, new or otherwise, that's being constructed. I think it was a failure to not have the design, zoning, and plan in place.
Amen.
At the.
Yes, definitely.
And so, we're here, but then we're going to have to make some really tough decisions. Historically, urban vibe, modern, those are some tough decisions we'll have to make.
And those are all part of the things that our consultant will help us get through. So, yes.
when you talk about the consultant after we submit this and get them to come back, are we gonna literally interface with them directly?
Yeah.
Is that, okay, I think that's kind of, I guess, I don't know if I'm saying what anyone else is.
They'll be here.
They'll be,
Yeah, they'll be here.
they'll be
And they're right in your spot.
at that point in time, staff's gonna basically
They will.
step back.
Okay, so I think that, I guess, helps. I hope that helps.
I have a
Time of
question.
school, you talk to the teachers.
Yeah.
At the rate we're going, November is going to come up quicker than we know, and that tear down moratorium is going to be gone. Can that be renewed? Will that be renewed? It will be?
Up to the city council.
Lord.
Yeah, that's,
Because if we're not done and we don't have plans, more buildings are going bye-bye.
To get everything accomplished that we want to get accomplished, November's not anywhere close to a realistic time.
I know.
So it's probably more like midsummer of next year, truthfully.
Well, I guess my thoughts are then other things are going to get torn down because developers are buying up properties. And it's not going to be Valley Junction if we don't extend that.
Well,
How can we get them to extend it?
members.
I think, just what is just talking to the council members, letting them know how important it is to you and this group.
And
Okay.
I think once we get a schedule laid out, I think the council would probably be more willing to say, okay, yeah, let's extend it till we get whatever comes out of this group's effort,
Okay.
adopted. I think that's only reasonable.
Okay.
Is there a document that we could have, with the historic properties, say for example, in Valley Junction here? There's something that, we could send out to all of us for,
There was that
reference material.
No, okay.
On
There
the
was a study
website.
that was done, designation of the parts of the commercial district for the National Register.
Right.
And so they went through and they looked at every property within that boundary to decide what was of historic context for the commercial district. Okay, they didn't look and they may have said, yeah, this building was built in 1900, but it doesn't have any relevance to commercial district.
That's on the website, the Historic
We can.
Valley Junction Foundation website.
We can.
It was a month ago still.
So we'll get that out there.
Okay, just for a reference,
Yeah, no, that's.
That's part of the educational process. I agree.
And did you have a comment on that or was it?
Oh, I have a bunch. So, yeah, that is on our website. It's about 155 pages long. It goes building by building and talks about all the stuff you guys are talking about. Is it architecturally significant? Is it significant to the history of Valley Junction locally? It could be on the National Register without having national significance. Everything we're talking about has local significance. There are contributing buildings. There are buildings that are new and they're not contributing. There are buildings that are old that are not contributing because they've been changed so much. So it really, the consultant who did that study really went into a lot of detail. So I encourage you to look at that. But kind of what I'm hearing here is, I hear everybody agreeing. We all have a district that we love. We want to preserve the parts of it we love. But at the same time, I think everybody recognizes that it has changed and will continue to change. And the idea is to guide those changes. And it can be as prescriptive as you want or hands off as you want. It could be that this group walks away and says, we don't have any recommendations. The city council doesn't make any changes. It could be that the recommendation is we want a historic preservation ordinance and it's going to lay out A, B, C, and D, which when you are doing something that's going to affect the exterior of these buildings. And that's kind of up to us. And I think, the city staff and the consultants will guide us through that. But just remember, it's not Colonial Williamsburg. It's not frozen in time, and it won't be frozen in time. And I don't think you want that either. Just reading on page 2, it says in the 1980s, city adopted a streetscape plan. The buildings on 4th and 6th Street were demolished. That wasn't that long ago that they took out a huge row of buildings to put in parking. So that was obviously a drastic change to what this district looks like, and it will continue to change. The important thing is to I think, preserve what we all decide is worth preserving, and guide, what comes in the future. You know, I think I'm excited by what I see here. I'm excited by the new construction. I've seen lots of ugly looking, badly designed modern buildings, and I'm not seeing them here. Do they stand out? Do they look old? No, not at all. But I think in 50 years, people are going to be looking at those buildings going, good idea. And just like they did when Atomic Garage was built, you know, at the time that was, let's throw up a cinder block building. And now it has some character and it's more beloved to the neighborhood. And that's going to continue to be the case. So.
And what's neat about the Jim Jacobson report too is it tells all that information on buildings. And so like Nan, when your building was built, it was very controversial at the time. Same thing with the building that we're in because it was considered squatty because it was tall enough to be a 3-story, but it wasn't. So there's always been times in Historic Valley Junction's history that things have been controversial. But now look at it, you know, you have a wonderful building and business in there, you know, the building that our business is in is quite amazing as well too. So it's all about, I think, perspective at that moment in time as well.
All right, and then,
Yeah, I liked when Steve used the categories of historic, like probably Department of Interior level, which has its own, like if you want to do something to this building, you have this, that the contributing buildings, I think would be great. I think that Nate, that's probably what you're talking about is, okay, it's not historic from the but it's contributing and it needs to be this category. And then the non-contributing, I think is good to recognize because that helps with the development of, it's a non-contributing building.
well, and
Wait, don't sweat about it.
that's actually been done and a lot
Okay.
of considered not to be contributing.
So
some of the
can
buildings-
that be in the master plan so that we can, that's like a proof point of the effort?
As far as adding
Adding that list or whether we review it or, and we don't have to do the whole 150 pages. But like, these are the properties that are historic. These are the properties that are contributing.
well, there are.
And it's already listed out in their report. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that's something that we can try to provide a link to.
Well, I'm just saying in the master plan, and again, I'm looking for a way so that we avoid the consternation of development and rehab and modification that is inevitable and is always going to happen so that there's expectations that everyone is educated on and we're just relieving everybody from the pain points of the recent couple of years of the new development. And if everyone trusts that there is a list of historic contributing and non-contributing buildings and they have to be okay, that when it's non-contributing, this is what can happen. If it is contributing, maybe more safeguards, maybe there's more bumper rails. And if it's
That's
historic,
something that should be addressed in the design guidelines.
yes, right. And I liked how, yeah, there's just those terms.
It's a very objective way to think about it.
Yes, right.
Which is the way we should be going.
Yeah.
As you pointed.
The thing, yeah. One of the big things I think, though, going back to what you said, is that I think we need to figure out a way to turn what has seemed to become light or a negative consternation. It is fabulous that the neighborhood loves this area so much that they want to protect it. And we need to, I think, really work on that relationship so that, I mean, what advantage is that? That is huge to have the neighborhood so in love with this little beginning of our city. And, you know, I did. My first house that I bought was on 7th Street. So I guess I lived in the neighborhood too, right down from where Valley Stadium used to be.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my first house I bought. So, I mean, maybe that's why I identify so much with that. But I think that is coming together of these two seeming opposing forces is what will create so much strength.
Yeah. It is, and actually what we're going through is very common throughout the country. You know, Steve came from Burlington. Prior to that, you were, where were you in Illinois?
I lived in Chicago in the city.
Didn't you do historical work
Yeah, and in Wisconsin and Chicago and Burlington, yeah. And every community is different. You could be on the opposite page and have a declining population and disinvestment, and your buildings are falling down because no one cares enough to fix them up or replace them. And that's a totally different problem. I think it's a worse problem to have. It's not the problem you have now, so.
All right, well, thank you all for those comments, and they're really great, but I do want to kind of bring us back to the point at hand, which is the scope of work. And we did get caught on one of the scopes of work, and I think Nate, what Clyde read. No, that's all right. It's that's the whole point that we have these discussions.
Thanks a lot, Nate.
We can't talk, we learn from all of it. I'm gonna ask again, so Nate, what Clyde read off to you seemed to be something that would work.
Yeah, I think it's a stepping stone to go in the right direction.
All right, so with that in mind, I'm gonna ask if there are other comments that we have not pertaining to the historical or, Bank Island, yeah.
Yeah, I have a bit of a shift of gear. What I'm kind of reading through here, I was kind of just tagging them with their commercial or residential kind of focused points. It seems overwhelmingly commercial focused, and I know I've heard from many social circles and groups throughout the neighborhood that the residential aspect of the study area kind of falls to the wayside a little bit when you read about it. We just talked about commercial for an hour. Not like we should, but I think residential deserves as much time. And I'm actually not really seeing a lot of specificity in these, and maybe they don't need to be specific. I mean, we're already at 18 points. A couple of the ones that I think I'm gonna call out, I guess, that come under that comment is like point number 6. It's just generally, so lumping commercial, so you're literally just saying like investment in or redevelopment of existing commercial and residential areas. I mean, should they be lumped as if they are, does it matter that we're lumping them, or is residential important enough that we really need to emphasize in our requests of work that we actually do want a very specific look at the condition of residential buildings? And then, I mean, we kind of touch on property maintenance in general on point 15, and then point 16, we talk about the ways of funding structures basically, but we don't actually specify kind of structures. So I think the point, I mean, yeah,
What I'm also do here is, I'm gonna kind of take the question and throw it back to you. And throw it back to the group as a whole, because as staff, in the position I am right now, our job is to basically get input from you guys on what should be in here. So when you ask, should it be in here? I don't think it's necessary or correct at this stage for me to say yes or no.
okay.
So I think what I'll do is just kind of open that up to the group and ask them, what do you think of this point? Do we need to have something more specific for residential? I will comment and say that with residential, it does become a little bit more touchy because you're dealing with individual property owners that may not have as much. And to have a specific guideline that they have to do can be challenging. But at the same time, we do need to preserve those areas. We preserve it through, again, financial programs to help out with some of that gap. So that's just, again, I'm bringing that out as just kind of points to help this discussion here so that we can come to a conclusion to answer your question. So I'll just kind of open it up and let comments.
And particularly, Mitchell, what specifically do you want to try to the consultant look at dealing in terms of residential areas that maybe not addressed here?
I know we've heard that when you go off Fifth Street, you just walk a little bit further, people are like, ooh, where am I now? Like, I'm not. Let's go back to Fifth Street. That's because of some of the conditions and appearances of properties. And I know it's hard to talk about this without getting the socioeconomic factors, because that's how America works and how residential property works. But I also want to point out that if we're talking about like neighborhood vibe, who we want to move here, we're competing with houses that are just getting shot up out in Adel and Waukee that are just move-in ready. I bought my house and I already dropped like 20 grand on it just because, carbon monoxide was leaking out of the asbestos chimney stack. the kitchen had just rat crap everywhere, et cetera. I think you're gonna have a hard time pitching that housing stock to new neighbors who are frankly under 30. Yeah.
We could probably do like a housing assessment need. So like, I think Vicky would probably tell you a lot of these foundations down here need a lot of work. So if you went through and put an incentive and we could get the funds to help, maybe it's a 1-for-1 match, you know, if it's $20,000, maybe we could come up with funds to help these owners out. But a lot of these foundations down here probably need a lot of work. And, you know, for a young family, it's more affordable to move down here than it is out west because you got a big gap in housing prices. So I'm not saying we need to fix foundations, but I'm saying maybe we need to look at the needs of what these houses needs, you know, make an assessment and then maybe we target it. I don't know.
If I may, I'm the champion here on the house.
Get it, girl.
Residential. I appreciate everybody who are thinking about it. And as you say, you can go a block over. Do you really want to go a block west, east, north, whatever, and you're running into neighborhoods that are not well kept or maintained? So if the property owners that may give an indication that they're not able to afford it.
Right.
Because older homes, no, they need that TLC. It costs a lot of money. Older buildings do too. I'm at Eddie Davis Community Center. We're 50s and we're running into that. So there should be, and Nate hit on it, and I've had discussion with community development, there should be something that really focus on helping the residents with some type of program. I don't know if it's community development block grant, CDBG money, where you have HUD money, if it's HUD money, I mean, something beyond our Metro program. It's a very good, Metro's a good program. It's just not enough money to help the people. You have to stay on the waiting list an awfully long time. Now, as far as the assessment, I often look at, and let's just call it for what it is. The city has done enough housing assessment. We did a housing assessment in 2019, 2018, two in that 1 year. And I think one just was on Valley Junction area, correct me if I'm wrong, and the other was reaching out to the whole city. That housing assessment has been done 2019, 2018, 2019. Assessment's there, but what are you going to do? So you know it's there, you know what's needed. These are not old assessments and study. So we are moving, I could belabor this, but I won't. But we are moving at the point where we now need to implement. And let's talk about, we haven't talked about the assessments, the results of the assessment. Bring that to the table. Let us hear about the results. And some of what we're saying may already have been recommended, and possibly the city just hasn't moved forward with it. I want to see that same energy for residents and residential properties because they really need it. Don't have, especially when they don't have the funds.
Just a quick note. I agree with Mitchell. I think there needs to be something in there, like similar to 18 where they had strategies on how to enhance the bicycle experience. We have something to the effect strategies on how to enhance the residential element of the Valley Junction area and leave that kind of open. The 2016 master plan references some of that stuff, Vicky, and there are some things there, and we
found it.
Incentives to create master housing stock where the city establishes some guidelines to be able to get the money. If you don't want to follow the guidelines, you don't get the money. House in a way using the professional experience of city staff that knows what houses look like and what they can be valued at based on that. But I think maybe we should have something similar to that and something standalone. One line point, like says something about strategies on residential, so it's going to be addressed. So I would agree with you on that we should do that. And
Ralph, you're talking primarily existing housing, existing.
Pretty much existing housing, I think it's going to fall into that. But if we just use residential, you bring up a good point in terms of rebuilds, like what would some of the rules be city has been active in establishing rules for the Valley Junction area with attached garages and other things in the past. In the last couple of years, there've been quite a few little things, I think, done. We can just kind of move on that. It's that. So we actually have attractive homes that reflect the period, maybe that they were built in, done in a respectful way at a reasonable cost, because we know full well it costs more to fix old stuff than it does to do new. And I think that would address your point, Vicki, where we create some incentives there. And,
And then also the neighborhoods, I mean, if they're not healthy, then the business district isn't, just like you were saying, you walk a block this way and you're going, whoa, what's up with this, when you're coming out of the business district. So, yeah, they need to feed each other. I mean, I think we all know that. That's pretty basic, but.
Let me ask this, and this is going to be something that we could talk about here just for a hot minute, but it's going to be something that's going to come up while we're working with our consultant. And if we're talking about housing, it's going to be the question of functional versus beautiful. That's going to be kind of the thing, functional versus beautiful. To have, like, the houses that we have in the area are, some made with foundations, obviously, but they may be functional, but they may be considered not beautiful. We have to figure out where we kind of stand on this. And if it is a situation where we come up with guidelines and say, hey, this is what our standards are, will it include that sort of stuff to possibly work in for, better siding or things like that? Again, I'm not promising anything. I'm just kind of bringing this up as a point. How far do we want to try to take this?
I think, the city of Des Moines was pretty effective in their new design guidelines in their older neighborhoods. When they implemented certain rules as to how they would apply to certain building materials that would reflect the housing stock. It might be a place where we go into it. We're just talking about right now what the consultant would talk about, but I think it would be a good point. We want good looking houses if we're investing in them. And we want functional, safe houses for people to live in. We can combine the two.
I think so too.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the standards, in particular with the city of Des Moines, a lot of the standards pertain to homes that are in your historic districts and being renovated, modified, or whatever, be it Riverbend, Sherman Hills, or Chautauqua. So, a lot of it has to, but I think functionality, I would be concerned about putting standards based on beautification. Now, you're a homeowner association, you want to do that, fine. But otherwise, you could be putting a hardship on a property owner.
Right.
Based on beautification.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And there's kind of two sub-points that help illustrate here. What we just mentioned right there is kind of one of the reasons why it's tough to when you deal with the residential side of it. Because you are dealing with those, okay, we got to have these standards, we got to have these things, and you're putting a burden on that homeowner. And sometimes that's why we maybe a little bit easier to kind of do the commercial side of it because of that. And so if we are going to go down the residential road, we have to look at and be prepared for those kind of unforeseen consequences that come with it. You are coming to my home and, maybe somebody they like the house the way that it is. Maybe they like to have the Junction that gives them.
That's where you create an incentive-based program that helps.
But again, if somebody doesn't
make
want
it
your
more economical. And we're just putting it before right now, let's talk about things we'd like the consultant to address.
Right, and
We want the consultant to look at residential housing. That'd be a consensus.
Yeah.
It is, and again, what I'm doing is I'm trying to set the stage to have just thoughts on what are the other things that come along with it. We can ask for something, and then there'll be other things that kind of come along with it, and we can kind of answer those a little bit later, but thank you.
Brad, if you're saying, I'm hearing you say that when it comes to residential, the city has fewer options to.
No, I'm not necessarily saying that.
Okay, well, maybe an idea is for the consultant there have to be some other case studies of historic housing redevelopment success stories. And I imagine there's a mix of city incentives, private-public partnerships, private investment. I'm sure there have been some really cool stories about neighborhoods that have amped it, ramped it up. And maybe just to hear some of that, so we can have suggestions if we can't mandate beautification, we can just inspire or offer some, I'm all that innovative
Right.
options.
I get it. I understand.
In connection with what you're saying, I think one of the most underutilized resources that I almost never hear about in any group meeting like this is the Main Street organization. I mean, the Historic Valley Junction Foundation is essential. I remember back before it existed and the merchant meetings back then. It is essential for the development, progress, and success of Historic Valley Junction. And yet we are in a tripartite relationship between the city, the foundation, and the Main Street organization. I never hear anybody talking about utilizing that huge source of information. And it's not just Main Street, Iowa, it's throughout the entire United States. And I would think that from you coming from one Main Street to this Main Street, all the meetings that you've been at, you realize how valuable that connection is.
Yeah,
I would.
Conservation is, it's what the Main Street program is founded on. And, and to Vicky's and other people's point, when you're talking about the residential areas, 4th Street, 6th or whatever, they may not be historic, National Register historic residential neighborhoods. They're older residential neighborhoods. And yeah, there are absolutely ways to address it, and you can use all sorts of things. You could be very restrictive. I don't think that would fly, it's just a guess, but it can be, if you're going to rehab your house, this is what kind of siding you can and can't use, stuff like that, so. And I'm sure the city already has some of that stuff. You probably can't, make walls with plywood and.
Pattern book.
Yeah.
That addresses older parts of town and the ways that, like you can incorporate, you can do additions and do different things, but still maintain
the care
context.
And that consequently is referenced in the current master plan. They do reference.
Right. I just would like to the consultant to work with us to ensure that whatever we're suggesting, eventually recommending and adopting, that it doesn't have a disparate impact where we may adopt a policy, think it's good on its face, but when it's put into application, it disparately impacts a certain group of people. And it may be based on income, maybe based on race, and maybe based on age. But I'd like to see something there that is sensitive and we look at if this policy appears neutral on its face, may have a disparate impact.
All right. Well, thank you for those comments. I think that we're going to have to take a look at how to make the residential portion of the scope of work a little bit more robust. I see Clyde over there scribbling notes while we were talking, so I think he has some ideas for that.
Yeah, and I think let's finish up our comments and then I'll go through my notes in terms of additions and changes that people suggested for the scope of work and, we can.
Right, so that's kind of what I want to do is just kind of bring this discussion a little bit to a head. And I think we covered quite a bit of ground here tonight. I'll ask kind of one more time, is there anything else that's glaring that we need to add to our scope of work?
Are we expected to finish this all in one session?
Yep.
Because,
The scope of work, there's two things. The timeline schedule for us getting it to the consultant and getting something back and taking some of the council to initiate this whole process. That's the other major piece that we need
Yeah,
to.
this is really getting into it, and we still also have to talk about schedule. So that's trying to get us ahead here.
Substantive part of it, are we saying is to page 4? Or do the other page?
The timeline, is that what you mean?
No, up to page 4 in the
Yeah.
timeline.
Yeah,
Is that the part we need
that,
to have solidified before we make the recommendation?
Yeah, so the look at scope of work, which is 1.3.
Mhm.
Two, and then scope of work is at the top of page 4, and then we still also need to talk about the project schedule as far as getting a consultant hired and how we can do this as fast as possible. We have some comments about that, so. Good with that, and do you have a comment?
I was just gonna ask, we were moving to the process.
That's actually what I was gonna head to next. You know, I had the.
Can we finish the scope of work first and then?
I think we did.
Well, I want to go through these to make sure that we've got agreement on ads.
No, I understand. And so that's where I ended it with, do we have any other comments before we get to the additions that Clyde alluded to? All right, so I think Clyde, if you want to go ahead and.
Okay, these aren't in any particular order. I'll just go through these. An analysis of housing conditions and strategies on how to address housing needs and issues. Does that get where people are wanting to go?
Say
Okay.
it again.
Okay. Analysis of housing conditions and strategies on how to address housing needs and issues.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I mean,
And
I'm assuming we'll get in
just so every
consultants here.
get out to everybody the rewrite of this so that you have it in front of you. So
Yeah, we have a little bit of legwork to do after this that we'll have to
Okay.
get back to you. So
then the next one, analysis of existing buildings and determination of their historic context and nature and recommendations for potential preservation.
seeing nodding heads with that.
Okay.
All right.
And then I heard comparative analysis of like type of neighborhoods,
Communities.
something of that nature. Okay. And then this is kind of, I tried to synthesize a couple different things I heard. Analysis of what should be the target populations to attract, to live and shop in the master plan area. Okay. And then on number 12, I added basically a market study and analysis of then the commercial uses that might be missing and recommendations for what needs to happen in the area. And let me make sure I got everything here. I think that, yeah, that's what else, that's what I picked up. Is there anything I missed?
Analysis to add a trend to the area, that would that include like what the trend currently is? In the district, West Des Moines has changed over the decade with its population. So with that, yeah, just make sure that concludes the current trend of who's living here, who shops here, and stuff, and not just who would we like to see.
Right, yeah, no, that's what that's
Mhm.
where I mean, in terms of what makes sense, you know,
Thank
for the area.
You know, and in the.
Right, if I may.
Go right ahead.
The analysis, I'd like to see that disparate impact there. To make sure that we're doing a review of policies and rules or recommendations we're making.
Oh, okay.
So that, you know, doesn't have an impact and we have to come back later or, you know, cause the city more problems.
Okay, so basically you're looking for some type, whenever we come up with the zoning regulations and the design guidelines, some type of analysis of what potential impacts of those would be.
As it relates to housing too, I would say residential housing. Any policy that's adopted or recommended.
Yeah, that's what when I talk about the design guidelines and the zoning regulations, that does encompass that, so, okay.
Zoning regulations pertain to commercial as well as residential, correct?
So it would cover all that.
All right, I will say that we do have to make sure that we're careful when we're talking about who we want to attract to the area so that we don't get into the socioeconomic and class and everything else.
I think maybe it was,
We want to have everybody.
yeah, maybe geared toward like young professionals and they're attracted to these types of amenities and, oh, we don't have any of those. Or, there's like those conversations, or children.
Okay.
We don't have a children's museum. We don't have a splash pad. Those kind of things.
Right. And I think if that's the way we need to be headed, I just want to make sure that that's clear. Everybody assumed it, but it had to be said. So I feel a lot better having that said. So that's it. Did you have any more, Clyde?
No.
All right. So, next thing we're going to talk about is the process, and more specifically, the memorandum I sent you guys as far as the, so the yellow tab that I make there for you is the memo. So what we did as staff is we heard what you guys said at our last meetings, and even prior to that, we need to get this moving. We need to get going as fast as possible. So we drafted a schedule that was really aggressive. We get the consultant here as quickly as possible. I will say, in light of some of the comments that we got tonight, we're going to have to probably change a few things just so that we can rewrite what we need to rewrite. But a typical RFP time is around 6 weeks. And with this schedule, we kind of drafted and shaved it down to some of the things that we left out. I shouldn't say left out, but just try to make a little bit of sense of our review times, and we can get things together. So let me start kind of from the top. So on Monday, we're going to take the request to council, and that's the 16th, to start up the RFP. Our goal was to publish the RFP on the 17th, which would be Tuesday. We have a little bit of work to do with our scope of work for that. So we're going to have to kind of, I think, have a powwow on that. And I don't know if Clyde has any enlightenment right now for us or not with that.
No.
We're gonna have to think this through a little bit, because we have to also make sure that everybody's in line with the scope of work and how we wrote it up. But I will go through with what we're talking, what we have right now, and just kind of let you guys know that there may be some changes, and we will keep you up to date with those changes and for input with that as well too. So the goal was to get it out on Tuesday and have whoever the consultant will be, have their proposals back to us by the 25th. That's by 2 p.m. That's when our city clerk accepts all new RFPs Wednesdays. We would review the process, review the proposals on the 26th and 27th. Had it as staff. There was a comment from Ralph earlier. You wanted to have more input, wanted the board to have more input in it. I will say that we kind of broke that down because we wanted to do more of the heavy lifting here now, so that we would have things listed out so that we can just look at it clearly and say, yes, it meets it, and just kind of keep moving on, because it could take us a week or even more to get this group back together again to rehash everything we just talked about.
Well, I think, I mean, the mayor has made it clear, as well as the council, that the citizens are going to be involved this time. That means we're involved. And this does not allow the citizens and the members of this committee to participate in the process. What I would like to see on those two proposals, those final proposal and the staff review, that Meredith would appoint maybe 3 people from this committee to be part of that review process. And then if there's objections or problems, they can come back to the full committee through Meredith at that point. But otherwise, it eliminates our ability to review ultimately what's going on. It removes us somewhat as a citizen from participating.
Actually, Ralph, what I was going to suggest is that when we get the stuff back from the consultant, we just send it out to everybody. And then if anybody has comments, then please pass those on to staff.
I think we need to sit in on it. I think we need to participate.
I guess there's no sitting. We're not going to.
Well, as a staff, you sit around and review this stuff.
So it's
you just have a couple.
One of those things where I get a copy of it, Brad gets a copy of it, Christine gets a copy of it, and we go through, make sure that we've addressed everything, we've identified in our scope of work.
You can.
Can I clarify something?
Meeting for the review with people that are part of this group that are the citizens.
Are you just sending this out to Tesca?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're gonna, I respond to these all the time. They're just going to get one back. So if you're thinking of, they're going to choose the consultant out of all these options and we have no say.
Right.
We have one option as per the process right now. And maybe would you like to
Yeah, I appreciate
know more
that.
about?
And I know it's going to be pretty streamlined and I don't see where there's going to be any objections to it. But we need to have input. We need to be involved. If we're going to be part of the process, we're part of the entire process, working as a team with the city.
I think that's really a relevant point because one of our entire issues, which goes back to Nan, what you said, is that a lot of this has come up because of the sense, whether it's real or not, that the parties that are involved in what's going on haven't really had a part in what's going on.
And so point well taken, and Clyde takes a ton off your back.
So let me ask,
We're saying,
let me ask a really technical question here, because there are specific benchmarks that need to be met.
Right.
In timelines of things. So, I'll just ask, what's more important? The ability to get it through as fast as possible, so to have this ready to go September 7th, or having you guys involved more in that process and having the RFP go out, look, another week.
First of all, I don't think it's going to add any more time. And secondly, it's doing due diligence on our part as citizens because we want to be involved.
No,
It's that simple. And I don't really think that it's going to hold up anything or cause any more time. I think, to be honest with you, it's simple. Yeah, you did a great job, but there's oversight there and there's communication and there's a partnership. And it needs to be evident that we see that done because it's not been done in the past. And so takes target off your back too, Brad.
Right, and I guess my thing is that I also want to be clear is that we want to make sure that we have you guys involved. That's why, for example, when asked the question, Brad, what do you think of this? I flipped it back and said, okay, what does the group think? It's very important to us that you guys are involved. We went this method because we've been hearing, hey, we got to hit the ground running. We got the moratorium that's going in November. Our wheels need to be screeching and we need to be going 100 miles per hour towards this goal. Now, I know that the thing is that I know that at this point in time, I can't say that it will add more time or it will not add more time. I'm not saying that one way or another. I'm saying that if we start to put pen to paper and it does end up where we're adding possibly another week, that's something that is okay.
How many years have we had to deal with this? And now we're going to lose 1 week. Is the committee going to have a problem with that?
Okay.
Well, that's the question. That's my question is that if that's, and again, it's not to be combative, it's just to ask the question of like, okay, we've been dealing with this for so long. We want you guys to be involved. I want you to be involved. If we add another week or so to that, is that something that is okay so that we can have that input?
Well, here's a few thoughts. One, I agree with Clyde. I think it's a good idea that everybody would be sent the revised document to review for comment. And that's it. You can take and run with that. That doesn't add any more time to it and everybody has an opportunity to be engaged. And then we have participation. It's a team operation here, guys. It's not you and us or you against us or anything else. We're going to work together. It's going to continue to be a good working thing, but we need to be involved.
And then there's 16 people that are part of the
council meetings. That's what I heard from the council and the mayor. And so I think that's what we need to do. That's how this whole thing started. And, we were there at the beginning when it started. And it was like the citizens were complaining about not being engaged. It's exactly what Debbie's saying. We want to be engaged, then we're going to have to put the effort forward not to slow this down. So whoever Meredith picks are going to commit themselves to engaging in it. It's more than just going to a couple of your meetings. You guys have enough meetings over the course of the day. You can fit one more in, right?
All right. Well, and with that, an excellent point. And I guess what I'll leave with is that we've kind of heard comments from it. So where does the rest of the group fall on this?
Okay. My opinion, and maybe Scott has an opinion on this. If you like Tesca, if you trust Tesca, then I say scratch this, have them give you a fee proposal based on the scope of work that we've all agreed on, and let's go. Because I respond to these every single day, and all we're going to read is boilerplate information that they took from the last proposal and they put in here. And it's a lot of time for them to do that and a lot of money and it costs them a lot. And this sending, overnighting 5 hard copies, just have them email you a fee proposal based on the scope of work that you outlined. And I think we're ready to go because you already limited it to one choice.
Okay, so all we're talking about is these 18 points plus what Clyde wrote. That's what we're talking about approving?
Yes.
Yes.
I would be happy with just to get an email with it all written out, revised, and we all send back an email approving or disapproving or changing or whatever.
And then once we have that, once we have the response back from Tesco or
Yeah.
whoever, the question is, do we have 2 or 3 members from this committee a part of that review as well? That's kind of the.
I'd be happy to. I mean,
It's a staff review. It's just a
Yeah,
matter of sitting down with them and saying, hey, yeah, I agree with you guys. It's all cool.
I'd be happy
And
to. I don't know.
Julie, that's what it's gonna end up being, in all honesty. It's not gonna be as big of a deal.
I don't,
We're spending more time on it right now than we'll probably spend on it.
yeah.
So
We actually do.
kind of, and Clyde, I'm gonna ask you this question. So with Julie's point there, as far as just sending out, there's a specific reason why we're doing it this way. And I'll let Clyde kind of touch on that point.
Okay, because we're government, there's a certain way we have to do things in terms of being open and, full disclosure and everything like that. So that's why we're kind of going through this process, even though we're doing sole source contract. It's different in the private sector because they can just, like Julie said, send out a thing saying, okay, give me what it's going to cost, but we need, the reason too, that what I'm expecting to get back from Tesca is how they plan to address these things. What is it they're going to have to do an analysis of whatever it is we're asking them to do. Okay, so that's what, when we get their proposal back, I'm going to be looking at, okay, how are they proposing to address getting this analysis done or this study done, that type of thing.
And that would be your staff review.
So, I think certainly, we can have a subset of this group that would maybe be specifically dedicated to reviewing the proposal and make sure it addresses everything. But I want to make sure everybody gets a copy of it. But at least with that subset would be, it's your job to get us comments, okay? Because as an example, like the survey, that monkey thing that we sent out, we didn't get full response back from the group, which is a little bit disappointing. But, again, I think we said early on, you guys are going to be expected to do homework. So
Then let everybody that wants to come to that meeting.
well, we weren't necessarily planning on having.
No, I'm just saying, every person in this room has a different perspective,
Yeah.
has a different connection. I'm not going to say, Nate, you shouldn't come. I mean, anybody that wants to come to any gathering, I think we've learned so much about everybody's perspective by being together that I think that your point that, we're the committee, so let's be the committee.
So let me
serve us.
Let me kind of propose this or whatever. We kind of heard a lot of different things or whatever. Let's just kind of, I can't think of any other more diplomatic way to do this than just to basically just have you guys vote on it. So if that's something that you're willing to.
Well, we're going to need to know what we're voting on first.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that, I mean, what I was going to say is this, is that, okay, well, I'm not the chair, so I didn't know if 2 of you guys wanted to talk and then
Make a motion.
come up with a motion and then we just let's officially figure out where everybody is. We have a lot of people nodding heads one way, some people nodding heads the other.
He's right.
Like,
We,
and let me throw this out as a thought. When we get the response back on August 25th, August 25th, we will send it out to the entire group. Everybody is welcome to give us any feedback about what we got back from the consultant, okay? And then if you want to appoint a subgroup that is specifically dedicated and responsible for doing the review and giving us feedback, that's certainly fine too. But understand, I would like to try to stay within these parameters. So we're going to have like 2 days for you to get through all of this.
Do you know what days of the week those are?
I'm sorry.
What days of the week are those?
Our review is gonna be Thursday, Friday. So
Yeah.
Thursday, 26th, Friday, the 27th.
And, yeah.
Set a
and-
meeting time right now for it.
Well, again, that's when.
And we got-
We gotta figure out if it's something that everybody wants first.
Technically, we got through the weekend also because we want to be able to get back to Tesca on Monday, August 30th to say, yeah, this looks fine, or no, you need to adjust something. Okay.
What would work better for you, the subcommittee, if it was to be approved? Subcommittee to meet on the 27th or to meet on that following Monday, which would still give you an adequate time to respond to the contract.
I would think it'd be the 27th.
Yeah.
By the latest.
I think we're
Okay.
approaching it.
And I don't think it's going to be a complicated.
Far as-
I'm going to make a motion.
You may
I'd make a motion that we appoint three members, that you appoint three members of this committee to participate in the staff review of this RFP.
I second.
Second. All in favor of forming the subcommittee, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
One, two.
That was 3.
Opposed.
1, 2, 4.
Okay. So, Madam Chairperson, who do you want to reserve volunteers?
I would say, let's ask for volunteers. If there was someone that wants to step up, I think it's important that we have representation from residents, from businesses, from property owners. And with this too, please reach out to those that you represent and get their feedback on this. So that way we can come with a wholehearted discussion representing everyone that is here tonight.
I will.
So we're looking for volunteers.
Dan, you would like to volunteer? Vicki, you'd like to volunteer? Debbie, you'd like to volunteer? Aaron, you'd like to volunteer?
So
We got 4.
That's okay. It don't matter if it's 4 or 5 or whatever, but.
Oh, man, Vicky.
And again, if you're not on that subcommittee, still doesn't mean you can't give us comments.
Yeah,
Still
absolutely.
send that to us ahead of time for review.
Yeah, when we get it on the 27th, we'll send that, or on
26.
20.
No, 25th.
When we get it on the 25th, we'll send it out the 25th.
And so it'll be our responsibility to immediately respond to that, to provide you any additional comment that the review group is going to look at when they prepare for their final proposal.
And is it an understanding that whatever the subset group decide will be for the whole group?
What they're for.
Well, that needs to be.
I'm good with that.
No, these are for
No, I'm good with that.
representation and ratified by the body, but nevertheless.
Yeah, in lieu of the committee, they can make that decision.
If that's what the body says,
Make a motion on that.
fine, but we just need to know that we're making decision for everyone. That's all I'm saying.
I think whatever decision is made needs to come back to the group.
So whatever.
If you're gonna have this.
These 4 need to come back to the group.
Do we just want to schedule a whole meeting for that night and be done with it?
Well, that's the point.
I don't think you're gonna see anything in there that you don't like. I mean, I respond to these, I literally lose sleep over these things. It's gonna be fine. I mean, I don't think you're gonna scrutinize, oh, well, I didn't like how they only had 2 meetings for community input. I mean, I just don't think you're gonna know. I think you're gonna get to know the firm, and I don't think you're gonna find anything. Because we have one choice. That's what we should be debating. If we wanted to open it up. We trust this firm. I was on the original historic, several of you were as well. That's what we should have debated. Well, I'm past that. I'm good. Let's go. This firm just wants to go too. I'm sure you've been in contact with them. I don't think you're going to find anything. I'm fine with whatever you decide. I don't need to, I'm fine with whatever you decide.
Again, right now, it's kind of, like I said, and this is kind of, again, it wasn't to be direct, but it was to kind of, we got right to the point where I thought we would get to, where if we're talking about getting everybody back together again,
You're
we
done.
are adding more time. And so, again, this is
You don't need.
not my decision. It's not any of our decisions. It's up to you guys. So as Vicky brought up, does those four members, the decision they make is a decision for the whole group? Or do you want it to come back?
Vote on it.
Is there a motion that the subsect will make the decision for the entire group? All in
Motion.
aye?
What are they deciding? That they're not competent?
Well, I mean, really when it boils down to it, to be direct, we have, like you said, we have one group that's gonna be coming in. We know what they're going to say. We pretty much know everything. It's a matter of, as Ralph said, keeping that connection, building that connection with the group and maintaining what the council said that we were gonna do.
Okay.
That's literally kind of what it is. Even though we have one decision, it's about that, it's that bridge building.
So question, now that we've had more conversation, do people still feel that we need this smaller group? Or are people still adamant about this, or is this something that we can just proceed with as the entire group?
Personally,
We already have a vote, it's there, so.
It does.
Rescind that in some
Yeah.
way.
But I'm just saying, I think now that there's been more conversation about it, I think maybe people might feel differently.
What's gonna happen if someone from that group of four wants to make changes? Like is
They're
that now
gonna-
we have to come back to the whole group?
We would have to vote on whether they are able to make that change in the decision, or whether it would have to come back to the group.
So basically, right now, we have the group of four. Now we're deciding what's their charge.
Yeah,
What are they responsible for?
okay.
Are you saying we can't change our decision on the group of four?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying
Okay.
that if you are gonna.
Given that, I think Ralph was very well intentioned about trying to save time. But I think that at the beginning of forming a cohesive, I had a really good word and you would have liked it. Now I can't remember what it was. But a group that involves everyone with disparate backgrounds, but a common interest. I think we should set a time when anyone who wants to from this committee can go do whatever it is that the subcommittee would have done so that everyone feels like they're part of the whole, because being part of a cohesive group is, I think, one of the highest priorities that we need to establish, given the issues that have existed with this.
then why can't it just be emailed out and we all comment?
Oh, but again, that's something that we brought up
We're
before
gonna
and
do that also
voted
then.
separately. So
I mean,
we could do that.
That's why I don't think we need
Meredith.
the subset committee, but
Is that what you're thinking about for the group? Because if that's the case, then we would have them do the review and then on Monday, the 30th, we could get together as a group to vote on it.
I think whoever wants to come is fine. I don't think you should limit it to anyone. But at the same point, if we feel that we can just read this document over and everyone's fine with it, that's fine. And keep the process going. But if everyone feels, hey, let's review this together, then we can do that too. So it just depends on,
well, I'm trusting Julie because she does this all day, every day, to say, you guys aren't going to find anything.
yeah,
I mean, I trust that.
yeah. And I think collectively as a group,
We already did it.
We agree to the scope. It's more important that we all agree in those points, the scope of work, because that's what contractually they will be obligated to deliver.
So
And-
we've already had our meeting.
That's what we were thinking. That's why
Yeah.
this is our heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Heavy lifting is to make sure that our scope of work is correct to the point that we can go to, that we as staff members can say, we know for absolute fact, this is what this committee wanted, and that we can then move on it.
In theory, if you found something like, oh, they're not addressing the working group's point here, what would you do?
Well, again,
Just in theory.
but again, as Clyde stated and as was stated before, we're emailing what we
Yeah.
get out to everybody. So
Absolutely, I meant they
If
sent
we,
the
if we
proposal
missed
back to
something,
you.
you guys can then tell us.
Yeah, I
hey,
mean, they
you
sent
missed
their
this.
proposal back to you and it's like, oh, they didn't address this. What would you just say, hey, they wanted to make sure this was addressed?
Right, we would go back to them and say that they need to fix whatever they.
You need to beef this up.
Then it would it be sent back out again after the?
They would have to, yes.
Yeah.
We'd have to go
Everybody.
back and forth and do that sort of thing. And so it could be, again, what we're trying to do as a staff, trying to
Yeah.
make sure that we continue to have that bridge built between us and the community,
Representing what?
and that we're representing everybody. And as you just saw, we are not trying to lead you guys one way or another. We're just saying, hey, what do you guys want to do? So
I'm happy with it all email, and if people don't respond, then they don't care evidently.
Well, yes, but again, so what I'm hearing is there's a lot of back and forth, things like that or whatever. If you want to vote to rescind, if you want to vote on something new, I'm just saying a decision will need to be made at some point, and the three of us, the staff, we're not making it, so. So just tell us what you want us to do.
What is kind of consensus?
I don't
Tell me if this works.
understand.
We stay with our committee of four for the review. And then the final proposal is brought to us on Monday, the 30th, as a group we meet, and we approve it thumbs up or thumbs down. Everybody's happy. Everybody gets to engage, everybody gets to participate. A little more work on our.
But why do we need to meet?
Well, I didn't think we did, but I'm just saying.
That's why I'm saying do it all email.
But Meredith is thinking.
I personally think that we don't need to have these extra meetings. I think that we can go by the original plan and establish this. So
I'm happy with four people deciding for me. I mean,
you are?
I am, but if the group isn't, you know,
Go ahead.
I can respect what Debbie had to say.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Actually, Aaron had a point over here.
Correct, in her perception as well as Julie's experience. My suggestion, having attended just the second meeting with this group, is I think they need the council and other entities that will review this decision need to feel like this whole group made this decision. And I think it'd be great if there was time to plug in a meeting for the group to get together, just like we have today, but our focus would then be on the actual proposal.
An excellent point, but again, it's a decision that the group will have to make. Staff, we're not necessarily doing that, so.
And
We've heard a lot of good points, pro and con, but we've been at it for a while. We have a motion that was made and was approved. So,
And I made a new motion to rescind it.
did we have a second?
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Who moved in first, moved and seconded the first one?
Yeah, it has to be whoever moved it.
Ralph moved the first one.
Rescind, move to rescind it.
You moved to rescind it? Okay, is there, and who seconded the first one?
It was either Ned or Nan, wasn't it?
No, we do.
I did.
No, Christine?
Nope, I had big X's to ask you.
I'll second it.
Okay, is there a second to rescind? All right, all in favor of rescinding?
Could you clarify, are we rescinding his original motion or are we rescinding?
My understanding, we're rescinding the committee of four from
Yes.
participating.
Okay,
And we're gonna have
I was
a meeting on August 30th on the final.
okay.
But that'll have to be in the motion.
Yeah, that'll have to be a separate one. So the initial,
Actually.
oh,
No, I'm holding my points rather.
okay. So the motion on the floor currently is to rescind the initial vote of committee of four. And Nate seconded?
Yeah.
So we are voting on rescinding the committee of four. All in favor of rescinding the committee of four, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so the committee of four is rescinded. And
So now what?
I'd like to make a motion that we have a meeting on August 30th as part of the final proposal, final approval of the proposal of the RFP, which coincides with the date that you have as your deadline on August 30th.
are there any discussion? Second on this?
Well, I have a discussion point.
Well, after
I'm-
after a second, there can be discussion.
I'll second.
Steve will second.
They can just.
Monday, the 30th, what time is the meeting? Because they want to get it turned in Monday, the 30th.
Well, what we want to try to do is respond back to the consultant that here's what things you need to fix, if there is anything that needs to be fixed. So then we got then, if they get back to us, then their corrections or what they're going to add.
But didn't you want to do that on the 30th?
Correct.
That's a self-imposed deadline, right? The 30th, that's.
Yeah, that's, it's
Saying the 30th.
because in order to meet the 7th, we have to have staff reports and things like that done by the 1st, reviewed by different departments and out by the end of the week. So
When is Labor Day?
The sixth.
the 6th.
City council is on the seventh.
The 6th, Labor Day.
So you said staff review on the first?
No.
No,
No, so.
30th.
The way that We would be, okay, I got it spells out right now. When we get everything in, we will be emailing it to the whole group. You guys will review it. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, it's your motion, but if you guys will be reviewing it, and then we would meet on the 30th to see if it's good with everybody. If everybody's good, we continue to move forward. Is that?
Yeah, the staff review still has their staff review, but they're not going to have participation from the committee in doing that. But on the 30th, when we meet, hopefully it's a little later in the day.
I would ask if you would to get us your comments before that meeting of the 30th.
Yeah, so we can address.
You know, like if you can get them to us by late a Friday.
I think that needs to be in the motion.
You get it to us on the 26th, you know, put our feet to the fire. We have to have it back by.
It's actually on the
27th. What's that?
On the 25th.
It's the 25th.
That's when we get everything in.
So give us a deadline in the email. Tell us we have to have it back by 5 o'clock on the 26th.
That, or I'll give you to the 27th.
Deal.
There we go.
And so any comments that we get from everybody, we will share with everybody. So that I see, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. So go ahead, Vicki.
What time that Monday?
This meeting, clarification. My understanding that the best way to handle this would make it a special called meeting with only certain agenda items. So if from the review, whatever comes up that needs to be reviewed, those are the only items that would be on the agenda. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's the way the committee wants to do it.
I think that's.
And if there are no corrections or additions, do we even need to have a meeting?
Oh, that's a good point.
Well, if there's no corrections or revisions, it'll just be a matter of us all coming in here. Call order, take a vote, it's about 5 minutes.
Okay.
We will have to see if this.
Until we come.
Zoom,
yeah.
Yeah. Or you can just push a button.
Well, yeah, we'll have to look at,
Yeah.
so the meeting rooms will have to be worked out, is what Clyde was saying.
There was one, this is a side note. It's not part of the meeting, but a few people have commented, and I know I have the same problem. We work. And so 4 o'clock is a little early for us. If we could go 5 o'clock, 5:15, I promise I wouldn't talk as much.
No, that's fine.
It's up to this group.
That's up to the group. Again, we did it.
Yeah, I just thought I'd put that.
We'll have a motion on the floor. Can we?
Before we go, can we ask that?
Yeah, we can. So before we get to that,
Why should we come back if there's no objection? Isn't that something we can resolve, as the chair was saying,
Yeah.
over through email?
Yeah, that's what I've been saying.
Then
this is
come to
something
a
that,
consensus
this is a
through
decision.
emails that no need to meet?
If that's what you guys want, we could do it that way. I mean, flat out, if you guys want me to tell you what I think we should do, I could do it very, very easily. But
I think Scott's point's well taken. We should do things collectively as a group and show unity through that. I think that's Debbie's point. And so we all agreed to be part of this, so we got to put in a little extra. You okay with that, Cleo? Okay?
Yep.
So if Cleo's okay with it.
I think especially what Scott said is that is going to give us more authority and cohesiveness in going back to the city council.
so
I think that's really important.
So what I'm hearing, and I'm sorry I'm just trying to make sure, it seems like we're treading the same water here. So we already have a vote. It was approved. We're going to be trying to meet on the 30th.
5 o'clock.
Can it be a Zoom meeting?
We already have Zoom meetings, so yes.
Okay.
So,
So we can participate.
Oh, we could all zoom in?
technically, yes. Teams, sorry, Teams.
Team.
Zoom is like Kleenex. People think it's a brand. But yes.
Let me throw a question out to the group.
Probably be.
Because not sure about this meeting facility and stuff, and it might be most expeditious use of everybody's time of just doing that meeting as a virtual meeting. And then the people that want to participate can. And then we don't have to worry about whether or not we got to set up for a meeting and everything else we got to do. I mean.
And
does
you'll
that
send
work
out
for
links.
everybody? I'm sorry.
You'll send out links.
Yes, it'll be the same links that we send out for this meeting when you look at your agenda.
Well, we will send you like an Outlook appointment.
Yeah.
with,
Just wanted to
click on
make
that,
sure.
And it'll take you to the thing. And Scott, I think
The question.
you, that the first meeting, right? That'd be okay for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so, again, to kind of,
Make it 5:15.
kind of get with this again, we're kind of off the rails here a little bit, so I'm not trying to find this back in.
For the question, time to get back for the vote.
So it sounds to me that we have our schedule laid out. We had the vote. That's the direction that we're kind of going with.
We just talk about the time on the 30th.
5:50.
Time, all right. So there's a point on changing the time.
Just, let's talk about this meeting and then let's go to the whole thing.
So Monday, 30th, 5 o'clock?
Yeah, let's pick a time. Let's motion this. Let's approve this. Let's be done with this. And then
Make the motion, make the motion.
Thank you, Nate.
Yeah.
and approve August 30th.
Can't do that. There's a motion on
5 o'clock.
that hasn't been voted upon.
We got a second Zoom meeting.
You didn't vote on it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
You
we
didn't
need
even
to vote on
You
the,
got a motion on the floor.
What about having that meeting?
About the physical meeting.
So if you want to do it,
I'm-
it's an amendment, do a friendly amendment.
Amendment to have it at 5 o'clock on Teams?
The amendment to his motion if he agrees to it.
Whatever. That work?
agree?
5 o'clock?
Yeah.
Hopefully that works.
Friendly amendment.
Let's be done with this.
Right.
Everyone ready to vote? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion carries.
All right. So that's 5 o'clock. Get that handled. Another point.
Well, he brought up changing the meeting times, so let's discuss that now. Let's be done with that topic.
You wanna talk about it or you wanna make a motion?
Well, I mean, it's a team,
The friendly.
a team thing, so it's not what I want. I mean, I'd like it to be later, but that's what.
What are the suggestions?
Yep.
Yeah.
5 o'clock.
Oh, we'll be here till 7 o'clock.
Actually, hold on. If I could, so
5:50.
right now, we don't necessarily know the next time for our meetings, as far as actual dates for our meetings. So is this something that we need to handle right now?
So how are you going to decide then? If we don't know, you're just going to email us and say we're having a meeting at this time when you know?
The consultant to find out what the process is and what, how many public meetings, how the steering. committee-
To figure out what the meeting should be.
August 30th and the consultant's.
After laugh, I need some laughs. Another pass, so I can laugh. I need laugh for some important.
So the question is how are you still deciding that meeting time? Are we going to come in and have a meeting about meeting time?
Probably send out a Zoom poll, I would guess.
Would the
We
group,
could just
can
be
we
done
talk to the group and see
time.
if 5 o'clock work better than 4 o'clock?
You might want to do like a 3-hour workshop or an extended open house. I mean, we really don't know what
I think it
they're gonna
depends on
need.
how long the meeting goes and
Just need to wait and see.
I guess, I mean,
Okay, beautiful.
again, to kind of be direct and to kind of get this moving or whatever, if you feel strongly about it, make a motion, let's put it to a vote, put it to bed. That's kind of what it is. There's again, I'm not discouraging discussion or whatever, but, if doesn't seem to be a whole lot of it, so if we want to just make a motion to change it for like future dates, just so that it's handled, if people feel the way that they feel, we get to vote, we act on it, it's a done deal.
I think.
Anyone wanna make a
we need
motion?
Meet until we get feedback from the consultant.
that's how
I think
it
your
goes.
schedule is going to dictate.
No, and I understand, but again, it's a group, it's not me, Clyde, or, it's a group one, what you guys put.
I'm gonna have conflicts probably with 2 boys in football and basketball in the winter if we meet later. So I thought this was kind of a good compromise. It's already 6.
Well, just like you said, if there, you want to do the motion and then discussion and let's go home.
Yeah.
There a motion for,
For changing the time?
I guess I'll do a motion for regular meetings to start at 5 PM.
Is there a second for the motion?
I'll second it.
Nate seconds. Any discussion points on this?
already discussed.
All right.
I don't know what, I mean, I'm pretty safe if we start at 4 and I can get out at, things don't start usually till 5:30, but
I would have a problem with it starting later too.
Yeah.
4:30, anything.
Well, the motion,
Pretty better than 5. I mean, I could.
It's just really tough. I drive an hour, so I leave an hour early out of work to even get here.
But we do have the motion, that
Okay.
have a second, we can settle it all with a vote right now.
amend that?
You facilitator, you.
Give me a dartboard.
As a consensus. 4:30 work for everybody?
I can compromise. Yeah, I think
4:30? Would you like to amend
That help?
to 4:30?
Yeah, I mean, anything would help.
But I might be 10 minutes late.
I know.
Management by.
All right, so I would.
My God.
Luck with that. Yeah.
Okay.
To reflect a different time at 4:30 for regular meetings.
We're not going
The
with.
stated regular meetings, that doesn't take into account if we have special meetings or something like that.
Your brother,
Yeah.
because I can't.
Is- Nate, you initially second the vote, that motion. Would you like to second this one again?
Yes, I'll second it.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
All in favor of moving the original the regular meeting times to 4:30 instead of 4 o'clock, say aye. Any opposed? One opposed. Any abstentions?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so our future meeting's going to shoot for 4:30. Like I said, a lot of heavy lifting. Thank you, guys, on behalf of staff here, and then I'll leave it to you and you can, if you want to.
Would be fun.
No, any other comments this evening?
Good luck.
Fantastic. All right. Adjourned.
You can go to the bar after that.
Yeah, don't allow, you make the time or allow the comment. Any comments? No, it's okay.
No text, whatever.
Sounds good.
I was worried about how I was gonna get that in my bag, but this is when we leave, so good.
Yeah.
My son's out there waiting for me
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
for business.
So, yeah.
Hey, buddy.
I know,
He's just watching the territory, wondering when he's gonna stick his little big toe in the pond.
Careful, I'm big dog, you little dog.
I think I just have a little.
I think that watching it first is a good idea.
I'm not scared.
Well, no, you're not. My gosh,
I do construction.
you live here.
One time I said, I'll call it who, or how it is. I don't care who you are. I'll still chew your grass.
Your family's been here for a long time. And they all keep staying around.
They can't.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
We missed you last meeting.
Yeah, I wasn't in. Paul got a little. I just wanna. I think.